Raised by a mother with borderline personality disorder, Brad was always walking on eggshells, living in fear of the next violent outburst and unable to count on anything except the future being unpredictable.
They told me at one point, they're like, we advise you not to get in a vehicle with her because we are under the suspicion that she would do something to you to get at your dad, just out of spite. And as a young adult, like that was an eye-opener that someone might hurt me who's done nothing wrong purely to get at someone else.
Growing up with all that instability and unmet need had a major impact on Brad's emotional development, permeating his adult relationships and looming in the background of his own marriage breakdown. Just 28, Brad speaks like a man who's been around a lot longer, the result of a tough life and hard lessons learned. This is Brad Ordway. Welcome to Young Blood, the volunteer video podcast dedicated to young men's mental health. I'm your host, Cal McPherson, and this is a platform for young men and their loved ones to share lived experience stories and show that no matter what you're going through, you're not alone. Suicide is the #1 killer of young people, and changing that starts with speaking up. So let's do it. This show touches on some tough topics that may provoke strong emotions. If you find anything in this chat distressing, please do whatever you need to do to look after yourself.
We see USA trying to grow your savings, dreaming of a home for your fur baby and human one, and kicking life goals. Because we're here too, seeing more South Australians thriving. We see you, South Australia. Credit Union SA.
Brad, where did you grow up?
So I grew up in, small country town, South Australia, born on Kangaroo Island. Not that I remember much of it, but yeah, born on Kangaroo Island. And then I started my school life in Bordertown, of all little places. And then I sort of moved around with my folks. Like we went from, little old South Australia, like little Bordertown to, we traveled to Western Australia, Northern Territory. And I spent, of 12 years of school, I think I was maybe present at school buildings for maybe 7 or 8 of them. Just traveled, drove, saw the country. And yeah, so I guess really I grew up everywhere. Seen a lot of things.
Why did you guys move around so much?
I didn't know this at the time, but as I sort of got older and I saw a lot of the stuff that went on between my parents, it was a lot of parental stuff. My mother was, she had her issues, she had her shortcomings, and I think that was a bit of a precursor to why we sort of picked up and moved often. And we'd sort of stop and be in a place for a couple of months, and then I'd start school, and then we'd sort of pick up and move again, and that sort of went on for a number of years. So,
and how was that explained to you as a kid?
Well, the thing is, it never was. It never was explained to me as a kid. Because this started from I think 2004, 2003. I guess at the time, the guys that I looked at it under we're seeing the country. We're traveling, we're experiencing things, we're just seeing what Australia has to offer. And then, yeah, as I sort of got into my later years, or like you could say like very early adolescent or early teen years, I started to sort of see the writing on the wall, I guess you could say, with why we were moving and what we were sort of doing, what the purpose behind it was.
No, it's been destabilizing for you, always being in a different place.
Yeah, very, man. Like I'd make friend groups, I'd get comfortable, and I guess like as a kid, like with a developing adolescent mind, like a bit of stability probably goes a long way in like future like adult development. So, forming small community groups in towns where I'd start to settle, and then all of a sudden, like bang, we're moving again, and like I've got friends that I've never seen again, and that I've never heard from again. And before the age of social media, like I've got no connections with these people that I actually formed pretty decent relationships with.
It makes it hard to craft your own identity as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. And I guess over the years, finding myself, has been a bit of a difficult thing. I mean, like I've got family, I've got brothers, but my 2 older brothers, like they grew up, like there's a generational gap between us. When I was born, they were, I think, 17 and 19. So I essentially did grow up an only child. So I didn't have like a sibling family home environment to shape me. In hindsight, I guess that not having that has allowed me to shape myself in a way that I can sit here as an adult and say that I'm happy with. But I guess as well, I do wonder, like, what could it have been like if it wasn't that way? But I guess that's how life goes.
What was going on with your mum that you found out later on?
So my mum, if I can condense several years worth of shit to a small paragraph, say, my mum has BPD, or borderline personality disorder. So the borderline part usually stands for schizophrenia. And the personality disorder is, you can sort of think of it like split personality. It's a very, very complex mental condition, we'll call it, for lack of better terms. And yeah, the things that I guess I had to experience and see and hear from someone who, I guess, struggles to hold themselves together, you know, in a constant frame of mind, is, yeah, that tore families apart and destroyed relationships, and it made growing up for me really difficult. It made growing up for my brothers extremely difficult from stories that I've heard. And yeah, there was, between my mum and dad, like, part of the reason I started hearing about as to why we moved around was there was a lot of infidelity on her half. So that was sort of, I guess, the way that my parents dealt with it, is that, well, we moved town so that it doesn't keep happening.
What other sorts of behaviours did you notice in her that weren't normal?
Oh, mate, the rage, the emotional turmoil, the peaks and valleys of just a mental state that you couldn't wrap your head around it. Like, you know, as an adult now, and, you know, the short bit of informal studying I've done into psychology, and you look into the borderline personality disorder, and even professionals don't have it quite sussed out. It's that complex, it's that difficult, it's that tumultuous. You think then, like, as an adult, if you struggle to comprehend it and how it works and what happens, as a child, you couldn't even begin to get close to even understanding a fraction of that. And why
one key part of it, though, is it's unpredictable.
Very, yeah, absolutely unpredictable. Yeah. You can't map it out. You can't predict what the next day, the next hour, the next 5 minutes could be. An analogy I was telling some friends of mine not that long ago was, you know, what people need to understand is, for me, is that I grew up in a household and a childhood where things went from being very fine to very not fine extremely quickly. A quiet household to a screaming match in 30 seconds. Not between me and my mum, sometimes between my mum and herself, sometimes between my mum and my dad. But yeah, very, very quick to change. Very, very quick.
So what was the atmosphere like in general then?
Eggshells.
Yeah.
Eggshells. It was, you know, some days things would be quiet, things would be fine, things would be, you know, normal. And then other days it was hell on earth. It was terrible. And because, again, I come from a farming background, a trucking family, like, my dad worked away a lot. So he was away, well, pretty well, most of the time I grew up, my whole life. Like, he's always sort of done big hours, like Monday to Friday, driving interstate. So, like, I was left to sort of cope with my mum alone. And the closest I was ever to my dad was a phone call, or when he was home on weekends. So my dad has been criticized for that in the past by, like, ex-partners of mine, friends of mine, other adults. And I've never looked at it like that. I've always looked at it as, that's a man doing what he needs to do for the sake of his family. And I will always stand by what he did. I'll never criticize any of his actions because of that. But yeah, like, without having my dad around, and as a young child having to live with how my mother would be, yeah, that played a role in, I guess, what happened in later life. Like, that affected me quite deeply.
Were you scared of her?
Yeah, man. There was one time we were living in WA. I was about 8 or 9, and my parents were having a hell of a blow. Like, this was a bad one. This was really bad. And I guess, you know, as a kid, when, you know, your parents are fighting and they start, you start hearing the things in the conversation where it sounds like divorce, it sounds like they're going to separate, it sounds like they're going to split up. And as a kid, like that scares you. That really scares you because it's like, shit, like my family life is about to just be torn apart. So I was about 9 years old. And for some reason, I fail to remember to this day. My mum ended up in my room, but she was yelling at my dad. And I was pretty upset. Like I was pretty shaken up by the things that were being said and what was going on. And I remember I sort of snapped a little bit and I yelled at my mum. I'm like, just get out my room, get out my room. And she flung me around and she beat the shit out of me just because I was uncomfortable. She was in my space and I'm like, I need space to breathe. Just get out my space, get out my room. Like this is meant to be my room, my sort of safe space. And then, yeah, she proceeded to just lay into me. As a 9-year-old.
That's awful, man. Sorry that you had to go through that. It's brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we hear about that less often coming from a mother, rather than a father.
That's always the stereotype. Is it's the vengeful father that does stuff like that. And from that day forward, like I really discovered, that that's not what a parent's meant to do. That's not what someone who loves you, someone who raised you, someone who birthed you is meant to do. That's not right. That's not normal.
And would she come in and apologize, or could she never say that she was sorry?
There were times where she'd say sorry and she would apologize. The repetition of similar events sort of made those apologies more and more and more just hollow. And it just didn't mean much. But the hard thing was as well, because of my age, it's not as if I could get away. Like even if she said sorry, whether I believed it or felt it or she meant it or not, I couldn't go anywhere. What was I going to do? Like I was living at the time that happened, we were living in Western Australia. Mind you, I'm from South Australia, from Kangaroo Island. I had no family over there. I couldn't just go and stay with an aunt or an uncle or a sibling or anything. Like I was stuck in that environment.
Did you think about running away?
No, I never did, to be honest. Why? I honestly, I couldn't tell you, but I guess maybe the subconscious thought that it's like, yeah, where am I going to go? Like I'm in another state with no family around me, or the nearest family is a couple thousand kilometers away. Like, where am I going to go? What am I going to do?
That's tough,
so
man.
You stayed with it.
How did your dad explain it to you? Or what did he say about the situation?
Oh, he hated it. He hated it just as much as me. He openly vocalized the fact that he hated leaving each week to go and do work to make sure everything's taken care of and leave me in that environment. To this day, like my dad's 69, 70 years old, and to this day, he still beats himself up over that he left me in that environment. But he didn't know what to do, because the only thing worse in his eyes than leaving me in that environment was not going to work every day to provide eventually an escape from that environment. So for him, like I can't imagine. Like, I'm not a father. I'm 28, but I've got no kids. I'm not a father, so I don't understand that level, that connection. But that was the way he always explained it to me, is that the only thing worse than leaving you there was not doing what I have to do, which would keep you there longer. I can't imagine what that's like.
Did you get the other side of the spectrum from your mum, the affection and love, or what looked like it?
Yeah, look, I will not sit here and deny that there were good times. There were. I do have fond memories with my mum. I do, like every child should or would have. Yeah, there were great times where, you know, her and I, like we do our own travel. Like there was one time with an ex-partner of mine, like we went to Perth and we stayed for a week and caught up with some family friends, and that was a good experience. That was a really good experience. Even growing up, things that her and I went and did together, like there were good times. There were, and I'll never discredit or discourage those good times. But then I guess it comes down to, you know, some people use the example of, you know, when things were good, they were good, but when things were bad, they were really bad. And how you decide where to go from there is difficult.
And that only makes it more confusing for you. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I didn't cut ties with my mum until 2018, because I moved out of the farmhouse I was living in, where I was going to school out in the Mallee. And I moved with my dad into Murray Bridge in end of 2014, sorry. And then, yeah, I ended up cutting ties with my mum in 2018. And then haven't spoke to her since, but yeah, from 2015 to 2018 things were really bad, and this was in my real young adult life.
How do you feel it impacted your development?
Oh, mate, the anxiety that I have from look, and I'll admit my mental state has become a lot better over the years, especially the last couple years. Namely, as well, this year, the last 6 months, I've really started to get on top of some things. But in general, the anxiety, the feelings of hopelessness, the fear of a day being unpredictable, like what's going to happen, what's going to go wrong today, and when something goes wrong, how long until it's going to get better. Even there was a time where I was afraid to ask simple yes or no questions to anyone because I was just so accustomed to, if I asked a simple question, that I could get yelled at, or it would just be an outright no. But it would be an outright no, but it would be a very aggressive one, a no that cuts deep, a very savage no to just a simple question.
Mm. So you're always waiting to get hit, waiting for something to happen.
Always anticipating. Yeah. Always anticipating something really bad to happen. Yeah.
And that skews your whole worldview. Were you someone who became pessimistic or just fearful?
I always tried to fight the pessimism. I always did. I always tried to fight it. And I guess it was my dad that gave me that hope, because I guess if you can create an analogy out of it all, as bad as things were, let's say Monday to Friday, at home with my mother, my dad would come home Saturday or Friday night. So it's like, that's when things would get better. So in a way, that time that my dad would be away from home and he would be working, it sort of taught me that as bad as things may be for a stretch of time, they will get better. Something will come along, something will happen, like it will end. The storm will pass, you could say.
And did she acknowledge her mental illness and try to get help for it?
No. We always sort of hoped that she would see it, or that she could maybe see herself through other people's eyes, but no, it was always other people's fault. It was something else to blame, that, I got really angry and I did that because of this, or you said that. There was no accountability for it. And it was always someone else, something else's fault.
And that's the cause. Another pretty common part of that condition.
Yeah. Accountability is a major thing for BPD. And look, some people, it's not as severe. Other people, it's really severe. So if I can fast forward a little bit. So in 2016, it was my dad's 60th birthday. Really big event, really cool night. We had it at my dad's house at the time. And the night after, the Sunday night, this is where things really went downhill really, really fast. My parents had formally separated in 2012, and they were sort of a little bit off and on until 2016. So then the Sunday night after my dad's 60th birthday, my mum was just trying to be affectionate with my dad. And my dad at this point was sort of like, just not about it. Like he'd been off and on with mum for a good 38 years that they were married. And by this point he was sort of just, no, I'm done. Like I'm not putting up with it anymore. And my mum did not take that well. She snapped quite violently, very violently. And my dad ended up trying to get her out the house away from me. And it was to the point where, because my dad used to wear glasses, he still does, and she was trying to knock them off his head so she couldn't see. And this was 6, 7 o'clock at night, so it was dark, and my dad couldn't see, and my dad was trying to run away from her and try to get away from her. And like, my dad's a big bloke, like he's a 6'2", 6'3" burly truck driver. Like he's not a frail man. He's got some size to him. And yeah, my mum was trying to knock his glasses off his head so he couldn't see. And at that point, my dad was like, well, if I can't see, I don't know what she's going to do. Like, I don't know if she's going to find a brick that's in the yard and hit me over the head with it. And my dad trying to get away, eventually he tried to climb in his car, and she ended up just going after him, and she grabbed the car door, and she's like beating his head with her, and he ended up pushing her to the ground, and then he like took off up the driveway, and I was sort of left in the house, and my mum comes scrambling back in the house. And my bedroom at the time, I had a bed that was in the corner of a room, so if I was on the bed, there was nothing but walls around me, and she bailed me up in the corner with a very beady-eyed, psychotic look on her face. And she was like, I don't understand what I do wrong. I don't understand why your father treats me like this. I don't, and I was like, mind you, at the time, I'm 18, nearly 19. I'm like shivering with fear because I've got this woman who's just beat the shit out of my dad and is now like in my face. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And then I end up going out the back of the house, and I called my brother who was living in Adelaide, and I said, like, Mum's lost it. Dad's run off. It was a pretty aggressive fight outside. Like, I don't know what's happening. And in no uncertain terms, my brother said, fuck this, I'm handling this right now. And he hung up. Next thing I know, probably within 5 minutes, a pair of domestic violence police officers rolled up at my dad's house. And they detained my mum separately. And they said, look, go and find your dad. Go see where your dad's at. So I jumped in my car, and I went for a short drive, and it was just up the hill. So we used to live in Murray Bridge on the road that goes up to the speedway there. So I just drove up the hill, and then I found my dad just walking around like in tears. And that was hard because I'd never, in the 18, 19 years I'd been alive at that stage, I'd never seen my dad shed a tear. That was hard on me. So we went back down to the house. The police had taken Mum away, and another 2 police officers rolled up, a pair of female domestic violence coppers, and they sat my dad and I in a car. They took separate statements from us about what happened. And then from that day on, there was an AVO, restraining order put in place. And then that became really difficult because it led to me having to basically report my mum to the police for certain things, certain breaches of the intervention order. And they told me at one point, they're like, we advise you not to get in a vehicle with her because we are under the suspicion that she would do something to you to get at your dad, just out of spite. And as a young adult, like that was an eye-opener that someone might hurt me who's done nothing wrong purely to get at someone else. So that changes your perspective on life. That does.
How do you put into words what it was like to be a young man and see this in your parents and see your dad in that much pain and your mum in that much distress and have you caught in the middle of it and not have any control over that situation?
Helplessness comes to mind. Yeah, helplessness, hopelessness even. To sit there and watch and know that realistically I am quite powerless to do anything to fix or to even help the situation, that takes it out of you. As a young man, and especially coming from the background that I do, like the norm is that a man is a provider. And that's how my dad raised me to be a provider, be someone who others can come to with their problems and you've always got something to help or to fix the problem. And in moments like that, which I saw, you honestly feel like I can't be the man I was raised to be. I can't fix, I can't help, I can't aid, I can't repair. I can do nothing but sit here and watch. And you get overrun with feelings of guilt when you can't help in that situation.
So what happened to your mental health? I'm guessing this underpinned.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. All of that and yeah, when you're around that much distress and you've got all those feelings swirling around and it's not your fault, but can be hard to not internalize it, direct it back at yourself in some way, have it manifest in your own personal life and your relationships with other people as well. Like this is a very difficult thing.
No, absolutely, man. The whole being a fixer or a provider, yeah, that became something that was very ingrained in me That it's compelling. Like I have to do it. I have to be someone who can provide, who can fix, who can repair. And the way that environment shaped me, yes, there are some good things that have come out of it. I feel like if it weren't for that upbringing, I wouldn't have the resilience that I do to a lot of things. And I've had many comments on parts of my life where people have just sat there and looked at me and go, how are you okay right now? How do you deal with everything? And it's shameful to sit there and say, like, because my life's been a little bit shit. That's how I get through these things. And yeah, okay, that's probably pessimistic at its core, but at the same time, I'm almost proud that I can just hold my head high and just keep walking when life gets tough. And that's another thing my dad taught me, just keep walking. Whatever happens, it doesn't change the fact that there's work to do tomorrow. The sun's going to come up, the sun's going to come down. You just got to keep going.
Have you been someone who's always actually processed this stuff though, or did you push it down for a long time and you've had to learn how to do that?
I wouldn't say that I pushed it down, but because I grew up alone, because I didn't have siblings around me, again, because there was that generational gap, I didn't have the tools to process things. I didn't know how. So again, not that I pushed it down or repressed it. Like I was someone who learned very quickly how to feel feelings and that it's important to feel feelings. But to say that I had the tools to process things, I can't say that I did.
Did you tell people about what was happening?
No, not very often. Not very often, and not many people. When I was going to school from 2009 to 2014 out in the Mallee at a little town called Karoonda, we had a counselling team out there. And there was this wonderful, wonderful lady by the name of Margie Arbin, and she was like the local youth counsellor. And she actually lived just up the road from the farm that I was in. And she was brilliant. I owe a lot to her in the way that she taught me how to deal with things, and she gave me like an adult mind to speak to, considering I couldn't talk to my mother for obvious reasons. My dad was never really around. I could talk to him over the phone and everything, but I guess it was hard for him because when he's a couple of thousand kilometers away in a truck, anything he may say over the phone is sort of going to be a little bit undermined by the fact that he can't just be there. So Margie gave me the tools and she helped me. She was that support system I had. She was almost like a second mother figure, if that makes sense. She gave me the help to sort of guide me through some of those years. Yeah. Maybe too little too late, because it was in the last several years of my schooling. So like I said, 2009 to 2014, I finished school in 2014. I finished year 12. So it was only during them last couple of years that she really came along to help me, but I'd still rather have had that than to have not had it.
And you would have had so many instances of variations of these kinds of episodes. Like you talked about the most extreme ones there, but living on a knife's edge all the time, carrying that tension around, seeing those outbursts, normalizing those outbursts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
It's part of, I guess, building a thick skin or resilience. I get up day after day, I continue to push forward, but then there's, like it is for our return servicemen overseas when they're serving and they have a mate that dies or something happens, because they need to survive and get on, do the next day and next job, they're able to not process that in the moment, but just say like, okay, devastating, but right now we don't have time to be able to deal with this. Not saying that they're the same kind of a situation, but just because you were always, or felt like you were always under an element of threat, or certainly never just like safe and secure and stable, you're in survival mode like your whole life there.
Yeah, survival mode, that outlines it very well. Yeah. I guess a good way to describe that in reference to what you just said is it's like compartmentalizing. You sort of just learn to put things in different areas, like you put things in boxes, say, and you do deal with things later.
Have you had some of those things come back around when you didn't expect it in later life?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In areas where I really, really wish that it didn't. even going into some of my relationships, like, yeah, the anxiety of things, like being scared to speak up, being scared to voice my feelings, uh, the anxiety behind, something could be really okay. Like a day could be going really fine, and then it could be going really not fine. And even in friendships, work lives, relationships, the early days of my business life, that fear of, is something going to turn to shit? Is something going to just go wrong? Yeah, absolutely.
So paranoia.
Yeah, paranoia. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I wouldn't say like looking over your shoulder, but yeah, paranoia.
And trust issues.
Yeah, trust issues. Yeah. Especially when you develop a friendship or a relationship with someone who, you develop an image of that person in your mind. Like, okay, this person cares. This person is meant to care. But then what if they don't? Or what if they stop? How long will they care for? Will they get sick of my shit? Will they just change? Will they just leave? Will they?
And you couldn't help but look at it through that
lens. Yeah.
Was there a point at which you were suicidal?
Yeah.
When was that?
The year escapes me, but I'm gonna say it was around 2011, late 2011 into 2012, just before my parents formally separated, or officially separated, we'll say. Growing up out the farm that we were living on at the time, like, I was a farm kid, self-proclaimed redneck. Like, I used to, love doing like farm stuff, like motorbikes, and like to clear my head. I guess this is one of the tools I developed to clear my head, is like I'd go walking, and like I'd walk for kilometers at a time. Like I grew up as like, hunting rabbits and stuff like that. So I'd pick up a rifle or something, and I'd go for a 4-kilometer walk for an afternoon, and just, sometimes it wasn't about the actual hunting I was doing. It was, because I did enjoy it, but it wasn't always about it. It was a therapy, because the walking, and even to this day, like a lot of people say that walking's great for just clearing your mind. And I sort of adopted that very early on around that time of my life. And there was one day when it was really bad at home, and it was going from home, it was carrying with me into school, and then I was sort of getting picked on at school a little bit, and I just didn't want to talk about it because no one understood, no one sort of could comprehend what it was like. And from the farmhouse that I used to live in, you'd walk maybe 400 or 500 meters, and you'd go up a hill, and there was a dead tree. And it was a night where I was going for a hunt, going to see what rabbits or foxes or anything were out. And I remember it was a bit much. And I sat on this dead tree that was on the top of this hill with a rifle across my lap, and I'm just looking down thinking, I reckon this is about it. I reckon this is where the story stops. And round in the chamber, hammer pulled back, everything. Well, I was sitting there really thinking, and it was maybe 5, 6 o'clock at night. Sun was sort of just starting to go down, and I'm just sitting there looking at the sky, looking at this rifle, looking at the sky, looking up. And I don't know what it was. I don't know what it was, but something just said, just hold on. Just hold on. It'll be all right. And I don't know whether that's just what my dad taught me to be like, or that realization that, like, when my dad comes home, like everything will, like the world will stop turning, the noise will go away. Yeah, man, I sat there and I seriously really considered, like, this is it. This is where it all comes to an end. This is where the noise goes away.
Was that the only time?
That was the biggest time. I had moments where it crossed my mind. And I had moments where it was like, fuck, this could all just go away when I choose. I've got my finger on the switch. I could just make this just go away. But I sort of I kept myself occupied. Like, I had my hobbies, and I did have friends at school, and that sort of kept me sane in a way. But yeah, that one night that I just referenced was probably the biggest night, where I sat there and I thought, nah, this is all too much.
How did you move through that and get to a point where you're happy with yourself and the life that you live? Did you have that at all as a young man? Times where you were happy and you did like who you were in your life?
Yeah, no, I did, because I looked up to my dad so much, and I just wanted to be like him. And he was, and to this, he still is. To this day, that man is still my idol. He's still someone that I wake up every day and I have to emulate being like my dad. And like every great parent or every adult, everyone's got their shortcomings, everyone's got their flaws, but that man was who I wanted to be like. And the resilience that I saw from him and that he taught me, I guess, was the thing that kept me holding on throughout those difficult times and throughout my life. And even to this day, like I have my moments where I'm just like, what would my old man do?
Why do you idolize him so much?
He taught me what it is to be a man and to be a worker, to have work ethic, to not give up, to think, to provide. Like when you have a community or a family or people that you care about, that they rely on you, they depend on you, they look up to you, and you feel that I could love you the best if I could provide everything you need to be happy, to have a good life. Or at one point in my life, the way I thought about it was, I'm going to care for you in the way that I wasn't cared about. I'm going to do my best to not let someone I care about feel the same way that I have. And there's been people out there that have said that that's not a good mentality, that you should look after yourself, that you should, you shouldn't hold others to that kind of regard. But to me, it's always been that I will never sit by and watch someone go through something that I did and not do what I wish was done for me. So,
how did that attitude affect your marriage?
Yeah, wow, right into it. There were times where it didn't work, where for the first time since disconnecting from my mum, that those feelings of hopelessness came back, where I did feel powerless, like I couldn't help, like I couldn't do anything. And it really, it's like it breaks your character down. Because at that point, by the time I was in that marriage with my partner at the time, I thought, I've got myself worked out. I know who I am. I know who Brad Ordway is as a human. I've built a construct of myself. I have an image of myself in my mind. This is who I am. And then my ex-wife, my partner at the time, she had some ongoing medical issues, and she'd been in some car accidents, and it wrought havoc on her body, like it did. And it's not fair for anyone to go through that, regardless of who they are to you now or once were, or whatever, regardless of relationship to you. But realizing at times during that nothing I could do, nothing I could say was going to help or change or make anything better, broke that image that I constructed of myself. It shattered it apart, because I thought, I know who I am, I know what I can do, and I got proven wrong. I had to prove myself wrong, and that really, really like took it out of me.
So what went wrong? Why did it fall apart?
That marriage came apart because the feelings of hopelessness and helplessness, that did start to set in over the years. And as a man who has always wanted to do his best, when you realize that your best isn't enough, and that the recognition for the effort you're trying to put in isn't enough, and that like what you're doing isn't enough, it changes you. Like it really, really changes you. And I will never sit here and make myself out to be a hero in my own story. I got to a point where I made mistakes. I confided in people I shouldn't have. I did things that no self-respecting man that I tried to be would agree with. Anyone who was like me, like I did things that my father wouldn't agree with, and I wear and I've worn the consequences of that. And again, I'll never defend anything that I did. I'll never write myself to be the hero in my own story. I know what I did, and I know the impact that had, and I know the light that it would have cast me in. And I'll, again, never defend it. And you play those kind of actions out over a couple of years, and it brings things to a grinding halt pretty quick.
Have you owned those mistakes?
Yeah.
What's that taken to do that?
A lot of self-reflection, a lot of realizing that those kind of actions don't come from the people that I look up to. Like my dad's been a big inspiration for me. We've established that. Over, I'm going to say the last 4 years of my marriage, I'll say, because I was with my ex for 6 years. I really looked up to people like Jordan Peterson, Simon Sinek, James Sexton, like a lot of people in like, I guess, the psychology sort of space. And I would preach the things that they would say to other people, and I would help friends through their own struggles. And then this dawning came to me where it's like, I'm not following the advice I would give to other people. And that hits you like a ton of bricks. There was a moment after my ex and I separated, within a month or two, where I sat there and I just lost it all. And I thought, I've idolized these figures of like this upper tier of mental capability and thinking and the human mind and human interaction.
And ethics.
Ethics, yeah. And I've thought I want to take that upon myself and build my character in that way. And this sudden realization hit me that I have not been that person that I've tried to be. I've not been like these people that I've idolized to think like and to behave like and to act like. I've done almost the complete opposite.
And did you draw that back to your childhood?
I think so. I think that's where there were several parts of my childhood and my upbringing which played a role. Yeah, absolutely.
Did you go see a psychologist or seek some professional help? It sounds like you're someone who could have benefited from that.
And you know what? I sit here now and I agree. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. And yeah, you know what? Maybe if I took those steps back then, that the outcome would have been so different. The caveat I will say to that, though, is that as I sit here today, I'm glad that it didn't go a different way. I feel like I would not have the wisdom and I guess the intuition that I sit here with today if I hadn't been through that. In a way, I feel like that my childhood leading into a pretty tumultuous marriage, I feel like that was my cross to bear. That was what I had to carry to bring me to who I am now. And not that any of it was a regret or a waste, because obviously at the time, like I entered into things that me back then I was all about it. I was supportive of it. I was willing, and I was like, I want to do this. I entered into that. but towards the end, yeah, it became a cross to bear. It became a trial by fire, you could say. And I came out the other side of it with some scars. I did, but I've always looked at experiences like that, whether it's a hard home life or past relationships or arguments or anything like that. I've always looked at them as learning curves, sharp and steep learning curves that I feel have shaped who I am today. And for the first time in my life at the age of 28, I can actually say I'm happy with who I am today.
How have you evolved since your marriage ended?
You know, it's funny in the way that life works. My current partner is someone that I actually met 7, 8 years ago when I used to work in Murray Bridge. Never really knew her, just said g'day to her here and there because she was dating a fella that I used to work with at the time. Very loosely knew her. And we sort of bumped into each other and we reconnected, I guess you could say. And we've developed this relationship that is so the opposite of what I was in. And a friend of mine who is a little bit clinically, psychologically trained said, the hardest relationships are the easiest ones. And I've met this girl now, and it's not been very long, but the things I don't have to worry about, the anxiety I don't have to have, the peace of mind that I'm now blessed with, it's peace. It's a sigh of relief. It's the rain clouds have disappeared, and it's really is like everything behind me really is behind me now. And I've moved forward into this new, I don't even like saying a new chapter. I call it a new book, because that's really what it feels like. It's not a new chapter, it's a different book. And that is so refreshing. And even like I've always had a good relationship with my father, but the connection I have with my father now, being with someone who has helped me reconfigure my mental state around things like anxiety and feelings of like, is something going to go wrong? The connection I have with my father is deeper, and the connection I have with friends is deeper. And people come to me, people that have known me for years, people that knew me before my marriage, during my marriage, and even now just after my marriage. There are people that come to me and they're like, you're healthier. You look healthier. You sound better. You just, you know, you glow differently, if that makes sense. So I really feel like, because my environment has so drastically changed, but it has changed obviously for the better, that it's just, like I said, everything behind me is just behind me now.
What about inside of you? How are you going to be a better partner and a better man now?
What I realized after my marriage ended was that I had to sit there and do some digging into, you know, the things that I did. Like, okay, why did I do them? What led me to those actions specifically? What needs weren't being met that made those end results appear, right? What actions led to those consequences that I inevitably went through? And I guess what that taught me, because I sat for a solid 8 or 9 months after my ex and I separated, and I did nothing but go to work, and when I came home, I would just sit and reflect on what the last 6 years had been. And I would read and I would study all these different things that would help me. And I came to a lot of conclusions about identifying the triggers for certain patterns of behavior. So the umbrella for all of that became about how would I word this? When you start to, well, it's picking up on patterns early. So when I start to see little things that worry me or start to set off alarm bells in my mind, get on top of them quickly. It's a lot easier to blow out a match than it is to put out a bushfire. Little things, when you attend to them very early on in the piece, you stop little things from becoming big things. And that for me is, I think, the biggest change moving forward that I've adopted or that I have adapted into myself, is that just listen to yourself, listen to the things that you wouldn't have spoken up about, to then identify where that kind of behavior is going to lead, and just don't make the same mistakes.
So when you notice those triggers come up now, how do you pick it up and stop that train continuing down that track?
So a big thing for when I was with my ex was physical needs was one thing, but bigger than that, was emotional needs. Like, if I feel like I can't communicate, if I feel like I can't tell you how I'm feeling, if I feel like I'm not going to talk about this because I'm scared of how you're going to react to it, it's almost doing the opposite of those things. It's like, okay, this is what I'm thinking about. This is what's on my mind. Communicate it. This is what I feel like is not being met. Like, this is a need I feel like is not being met. Talk about it, like communicate about it, or at least express it early on in the piece to be like, hey, I feel like I need this from you right now, because that would help me get through this time that I'm going through. So,
and being able to offer that for them.
Yeah.
Emotional maturity.
Yes. And emotional intelligence is a massive thing for me. Massive thing. Being able to be that provider for myself, essentially.
And having gone through all that pain with those poor decisions that you made, has that helped you to get over the fear of having those uncomfortable conversations?
Yeah.
Because now you can see the consequences of, if you don't nip this in the bud and you don't say, hey, I'm feeling this way, and that's important that we have this discussion, because if we don't, I might head down this path.
Yeah. Not that I guess I would word it in that specific phrasing, but definitely, like, you know, hey, this is something I need to talk about right now. This is something that I need to not hold in. This is something I need to not bottle up. This is something that I need to just be open with you about. This is something.
It seems simple. Yeah, but it's got to be the hardest part of a relationship almost.
There's a fella that I listen to, and he's been on a number of other podcasts, like Diary of a CEO, Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom, and his name's James Sexton, and he's a New York divorce lawyer.
Yeah, I've heard him on both of those podcasts.
Yeah. Now he's got a concept which I really picked up on, and it's, you know, if you type out an email or a text message and you hit send, then you sit there going like, well, fuck, it's out there now. I can't take it back. And the whole premise is called hit send now. And that has almost been like a revelation to me, learning that in the last 6 to 8 months, because it's like, no, this is on my mind, and I would rather it be outside of me than inside of me. I'm just gonna hit send now. And whatever comes from that is whatever comes from that. But
rather than have it just sit in the outbox.
Exactly.
And that's needed for that intimacy and that closeness with the partner, because otherwise you're keeping them at a distance because you're afraid, because you don't want to get hurt. But in doing that, you're actually not allowing them, you're not giving them the chance. You're assuming they're going to react like this.
Yeah. And you know, my mother and my ex used to make me very scared of arguments. Very scared of arguments, to the point where I would just completely shut down, go very catatonic, not say anything.
And you were very conditioned to know with a lot of certainty what they were going to say and how they would react if you said something.
My mentality behind it all was, if I don't say anything, I can't give you ammo. I can't make, like, you're pissed off, but if I shut up, I can't make you more pissed off. And that to me was like a saving grace. It's like, well, I can't make this any worse. Like, it's bad, but I'm not going to voluntarily make it worse.
So you're someone who would typically not yell back, but just
Never.
shut down.
Never. Yeah. I'd never, look, I had my moments towards the tail end of my marriage where I just could not keep quiet and I had to start yelling back. But that hurt to do because in those moments where I would be, inside I'm screaming, this is not you. This is not who you are.
But your default is to close down in that confrontation.
At least be calm. Yeah. But if like, and like even in an argument or let's say a verbal discrepancy, if I can be calm and just talk things out, that's fine. But see, I've been made to feel in the past where, you know, person A presents an issue and I go, okay, but this, and they're like, no, what you feel is wrong because of what I feel. And then at that point, it's like, well, I'm just going to shut up then. If I can't be heard, if the way you feel means that the way I feel is just irrelevant, then what's the point in telling you how I feel?
And that shows you how important it is to do that for your partner as well, where it's not even necessarily whether we agree on the facts or the logic of it, because we're different people. So for someone, something might be a really big deal to them that for you like that shouldn't be a big deal for you, but the reality is they feel that way. So if this is someone that you love and they're upset by something or something's important to them, then that's the point. And you're supposed to cater to that, not say, oh, well, you shouldn't feel like that.
And I can't stand that when people say, well, you shouldn't feel like that. It's like, yeah, but I do. Now what? I do. So what do we do about that?
And being more mature, actually expressing that rather than feeling a certain way and saying, oh, no, I'm fine. Or not saying anything. But actually being able to express it.
And a good concept that I've learned now is it's like, okay, I love you enough to disagree with you. Because if I just agree with you and everything becomes one-sided, I know where that goes.
And that's not
that's not good.
It's not you either. If you're agreeing but you're actually disagreeing, then the person you're putting forward, which you've put forward in the past because you didn't want to cause problems, isn't actually you.
And that's why I say, so I love you enough to disagree with you. Because it's like, I'm not going to willingly let you do something stupid, which is then going to in turn like lead to like one person or the other resenting someone. It's like, no. Like, okay, you've done something dumb here. Let's not see that behavior repeated. It's not even just a one person looking at, okay, you've done something dumb. It's like, if a group of people can sit there and go, why the fuck would you do that? It's like, that's behavior you don't need to repeat. So it's like, I love you enough to tell you like, hey, let's not repeat that behavior because I've seen where it leads. I've been where it leads and it's not good.
And you can have that conversation with yourself as well.
The best way I can describe it is it's like having hindsight. But I guess presently lived hindsight is basically wisdom in a sense. Yeah. Or experience, you might even just say.
How do you define the man that you're aiming to be henceforth in this new book?
You know, a big thing, because I grew up with no younger siblings, and a big thing that in my past relationship, my marriage, a big thing was the topic of children. And I've never grown up around young children. I've never been familiarized to them. I've never been allowed to approach the topic or the subject at my own pace. It was always put in my face. I was made to feel very uncomfortable about it. And my ex was always someone who was like, we need to put a time and a date on this. And it's like, well, I can't do that. I'm sorry, I can't do that. I've had no chance to familiarize myself with the subject. I'm sorry. And moving forward, I guess, going back to my father again, I want to be to someone who my father was to me. But obviously not with what my younger years sort of carried with it. So like, I want to be the best parts of my father to someone else. And that was a big thing for me. That was a really big thing because the arguments that topic caused. Wow. That was a pretty big factor into the downward spiral that my marriage ended up being. Yeah.
Well, you seem like an older man than 28. You've
I get
lived
that.
a few lifetimes, it feels like.
I get that a lot. I get that a lot. Like I had a fella that I work with, he said, like, for someone who's in their 20s, you carry yourself like someone in their 40s. It took me a while to wrap my head around that, but yeah. So I hear it a lot.
Not a bad thing. You've been through a lot of stuff.
I guess it's that emotional.
Come out of the other side of it.
I guess that is emotional maturity, emotional intelligence, emotional awareness. I guess that's where it's all come from. And this is why, like, I throw back. That's why I say that, like, not to sound pessimistic, but it's like, yeah, I've had a rough life. I've had a shit go, and there's people who've had it worse. Yes, but I'm glad that I went through it in a way. Because I couldn't sit here who I am without having gone through it.
I think the most important part of it is that you are introspective and you have been learning from these things that have happened as well, and the part that you've played and how you can be better. And then also trying to forgive people where you can, trying to forgive yourself and try to be better. And you've still got a lot of life to live, man.
Yeah. And, you know, I always try and see the best in people. I'm very tolerant, and I guess that's what this upbringing has brought me, is this superhuman tolerance that I put up with a lot, and I have put up with a lot. Not that I put up with a lot now, but like going back to when I said that some people look at me and I tell them about shit that I've gone through in a week, and they're like, how the fuck are you okay right now? I'm like, I've been through worse. So you get this weird sense of, resilience to when everyday stuff is just going wrong, and stuff that I guess would stress a lot of, stress most people out. It's just, it is what it is.
But balanced with the appreciation that you have to actually tell your partner about that. You have to work that stuff through.
No, absolutely. And
because no matter how tough you are, it all goes in. It goes into you. You hold it somewhere, and you have to be able to. You have to be able to express it. If
you know what, if I could bring everything from the last 10 plus years down to a single point, it's communication. Talk. Like, everyone's heard it. It ain't weak to speak, but talk. Like, just if something bothers you, like, talk about it. Even if you don't get it right, even if I use the term a lot, spitballing. Or, you throw shit at the wall, you see what sticks. You don't have to have the idea or the thought completely worked out, but you talk with someone and you work it out along the way. Don't get me wrong, there's time to process. There's time to think things out properly. I'm a big believer in, there are times to say hit send now, but then there's times to be like, look, give me 2 days, give me 3 days, give me a week to just put my thoughts together. Then I'll say what's wrong. But there are times where there's different methods of communication that will work better than others. But there are also times where it's like, I need to just spew a heap of words to work that out, and just work my thoughts out on the fly, work my feelings out on the fly. But methods of communication, just communication in general, I think is just the defining point of, I guess you could say, what my life has been with mental health and experiences and it always, just communication above all.
And find a way to stick around and things get better.
Yeah, man. Like, this too will pass is a good analogy that I heard from some podcast with a heap of people. I think Tom Hanks or something was in it, but this too shall pass. And it will. It will. It always gets better. Like, it can't be shit for forever. It really can't. Wars end, rain goes away, the sun comes up as much as it goes down. Like, it'll go. It'll go.
Thanks, Brad.
Anytime. Anytime.
That's it for this episode. If you like what we're all about, support us by following Young Blood Men's Mental Health on Instagram and Young Blood Mental Health on TikTok. Every podcast episode is recorded in professional quality video, and they're all up on our Young Blood Men's Mental Health YouTube channel. So please show some love and subscribe. You can find everything there is to know about the podcast at youngbloodmensmentalhealth.com. And most importantly, please share these stories with anyone in your life who needs to know they're not alone. We're all in this together. Catch you next time.